I'm here with my guest, Shereen Elsammaa. She's the Global VP of Integrated Marketing at Sambazon, which is, if you don't know, the number one global acai brand, globally. Over 44 countries you have presence in.
Mhm.
Um, I'll save and let you share. Shereen, welcome to the show. I'm super happy to have you here.
Likewise, Caleb, thank you for having me. Yeah, definitely excited to talk about what we've been doing at Sambazon. Like you mentioned, Sambazon is really very well known in being kind of the leader in the acai space. Since 2000, they were kind of the first in market to bring this all the way from Brazil to the US and globally. And we've gone from being very CPG focused and like really owning that space to now having 10 plus locations, licensed store locations on campuses and stadiums at airports, and like rolling out our own franchise program. So super excited for the growth that the company has achieved with all the leadership and what's to come.
From a growth standpoint, is there a focus? CPG is so established for the brand right now. I would assume still some organic growth there, but is there a spotlight being focused on physical store locations and franchisee network growth? Tell me about that.
Yes, definitely. So for us as a company, CPG was kind of like the growth driver for the last 10 years. And it was really the ability to bring a product that is super hard and difficult for you to, it's not like a blueberry where you can buy the fruit naturally and like you're able to put it in the blender. You have to kind of harvest it from palm trees down in the Amazon, convert it within a 24-hour period. A large portion of the fruit is actually 95% seed and 5% is actual fruit. So it's a very difficult product to actually like harvest and turn into something that's usable. And so it was really a big focus on how can we bring this amazing superfood and delicious tasting
Yeah.
like food from the depths of the Amazon to a convenient form factor. And that was kind of like the big growth driver up until a point where we established that like presence and ownership in the CPG space. And this was actually something that I came into Sambazon and led. I was leading the CPG channel as like the VP of brand management before I switched over to integrated marketing. And once we got the portfolio in a place where we felt like, hey, we had like this cash cow that was like on like a high trajectory of maintaining performance, the company and the brand was really more wanting to focus and shift into like franchise and bowl shop presence because that's another format of how you enjoy acai and how a lot of the mainstream US consumer, especially the younger demographic, Gen Z demographics, are more interested in like going into a shop, customizing their own bowl and getting
Right.
that experience like made for them, versus CPG really targets more of the millennial audience and parents and families that want the convenience of having this available for themselves to use, whether it's blending it in a smoothie or having an easy to consume, ready to eat acai bowl for you and
Yeah.
your family. So yeah, definitely kind of
It,
like
it's
walking across the journey.
It's a very unique journey because typically I think you might suspect that you'd have a store footprint established first, and then you would go CPG from there because people love the whether it be sauces or juice or whatever. It sounds like you were kind of had established in the CPG, but then we're listening to the market and saying people and consumer behavior has changed, so let's create a place for this. Is that
Definitely, definitely. And it's been, I think you nailed it. Like this has been a challenge for us. A lot of companies typically go the other way around. Like they start with their own stores, I think Starbucks, like any kind of food concepts like Kava or Sweetgreen. And then as you're progressing, you're switching into making these some of your top performing sauces or products available in store. And so it was a very challenging journey for us as a company and a brand and as a marketing team to kind of approach it differently and the other way around.
yeah.
But has been definitely a great like learning opportunity and a lot of trials and tribulations, but we're getting there.
For you personally, given your experience, there's likely so many different options for you in terms of where you can play this game of marketing leadership. You talked about the opportunity from a brand leadership standpoint, but
Mhm.
what was it that called you to the brand? And now today, what is it that keeps you there? Why is Shireen and Sambazon the right fit? Why was it and
Mhm.
why is it now?
No, definitely. So I started out working as a brand manager at Coca-Cola. So definitely come from a very strong CPG brand centric brand storytelling perspective with big budgets. And when I got like pulled to Sambazon, it was really the story, the founding story, and also like the impact of what they're doing. I think being able to do work that you're proud of and feel that you're giving back to the community. And all of this is going back to the harvesters and you're helping kind of enhance the livelihood of people that you're working with. You have a strong environmental and sustainability impact as well was really compelling for me. That was definitely one of the main beacons of attraction. The other thing was definitely the potential for growth and the potential to kind of like wear multiple hats within the span of like my 6 years at Sambazon and really feel like you're making traction and you're driving growth and you're seeing all of that like transpire in front of you,
Yeah.
building a team, scaling up a business and portfolio. Those were all like really appealing aspects for me.
There's sort of the classic definition, I guess, for most folks of what a VP of integrated marketing would do. But more practically, what do you get paid to do today? Like, how do you understand your mandate or what you're accountable for in reality?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love the question. I think to sum it up, like I like to tell my team that and the way I think of it is we're almost like an in-house agency, but with the benefit that you get to kind of lead the storytelling. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds, where with an external agency, you're being directed by the brand managers on what you want to do and how you want to say things and what the objective is, and they're kind of coming up and being creative. We get the benefit of kind of having that balance of both. So we oversee everything from own content, paid media, experiential and events, and like our web and tech stack, lifecycle marketing, which includes customer support. So it's a very interesting dynamic of like really being involved with a lot of touch points that interact with the consumer, and it's very much more consumer facing than typical brand management would be, which is more focused on like product innovation and like the health of the business and portfolio. So I think the that's kind of like the essence of what I feel we're here to do. We're here to kind of simplify how we show up to the consumer with a concise, simple message. Was a big learning thing that we'll get into as well, and like being too distracted and going different areas and talking about different things. But I think that's the crux of it. Like, how can you be concise, very specific, single-minded with what your main message is? And then how do you show up on these different touch points as you're interacting with the consumer along the journey in ways that resonate and really stand out and connect with the limitations of a tight budget and like being
Yeah.
tight on resources. Yeah.
I'd like to peel back some layers of that onion on that topic
Yeah.
shortly. But before we do, to give folks a better understanding of Shereen, when you're not doing what you're doing at Sambazon in this very exciting but also complex area of accountability that you have, what keeps the attention of your mind and your calendar outside of the Sambazon world? How does
Hmm.
Shereen set herself up to be the best version of a marketing leader today?
Yeah. So I think it's a combination of it may sound cliche, but really work-life balance is something that I've learned across the years of as I've aged and gone from like my 20s to my 30s and like late 30s. It's the balance of like really knowing how much time you need to spend giving to your work and then how much time you need to kind of like detach and detox and kind of separate because it does help you kind of reset your mental approach and like your strategic thought process around the work and like by just focusing on like exercise and living kind of like a balanced life and spending time with family, it really kind of like helps rebalance things and gives me a time to kind of like think outside of the box and get like outside inspiration for how I would want to approach a problem that I'm handling at work. And yeah, I think it's just like the other thing for me is also staying in touch, networking, talking to different people in the industry. We've been a big part of like a forum called Forum for Naturals. That's like a conglomerate of like different brands in that space. And that for me has been super exciting to have the ability to like talk to like-minded people who are going through your same struggles and like
Yeah.
just having that was very therapeutic, and knowing that you're not alone in that space and really helps kind of like expand the knowledge base of what's working, what's not working, and sharing these learnings and insights. Yeah, that's kind of like the two major things for me.
So if marketing wasn't a discipline or a function, and you could have any other job, what would your other job
Hmm.
be? What's your
Interesting.
other calling?
I think I would have gone into medicine probably. It's so interesting because it's very different, but I sometimes feel, again, I think it's this calling to feel like you're doing something where you're helping others and something that's meaningful, impactful. And I feel this is so much amazing things. Like I come from a background family of doctors, so I think that's also kind of part of
Yeah,
what inspired me. But yeah, I think that would be where I would like to divert focus or have had like an alternate career.
there you go. Before we dive into a few other topics, I want to set some more context for the listeners, and
Hmm.
specifically, if you can paint the picture a little bit high level on what does the marketing structure at Sambazon look like in terms of teams, people, roles, overall structure between CPG, store driving activities and franchise development. Just high level so that we understand the uniqueness. And it is unique in that, most brands, their dream state is to have the internal agency, the full internal team.
Yeah.
You guys made a strategic and conscious decision to actually do that and absorb things like
Hmm.
overhead and retention costs. So just help paint that picture before we get into the rest.
Yeah, no, definitely. So we obviously have a CMO, and then we have like different pillars and business units. We have a CPG business unit, and then we have an on-premise business unit, which is responsible for anything that has to do with our bowl shops, our franchise locations, or like our license concept. So those are kind of the two major business driving channels there. And then we have integrated marketing, which is my team acting like an in-house partner and agency. Like I mentioned, we oversee owned media, paid media, experiential and events, and life cycle marketing. And those were conscious decisions of things that we wanted to bring in-house versus having outsourced before for reasons I'll kind of elaborate on. And then we have an innovation team as well that is driving like the innovation pipeline across both of the business units mentioned and acts as like another partner and in-house like project management and executive team to support bringing things from conception to reality on shelf.
Okay, thank you. And so dig into that a little bit specifically about
Hmm.
why it was the right decision for you for this sort of in-house agency, the
Yeah.
integrated, and what has been your approach to finding the right balance and the ways of working with largely an in-house team, but probably some support in certain scenarios with external support. Tell me how you manage that and why was the decision
Yeah.
made?
Yeah. No, perfect. So the driver of that decision was the budget. We have a super limited budget. It's like 7% of our revenue essentially. So it's definitely very limited budget. And working with external agencies 6 years back, where we were in terms of the brand awareness we're at and like the growth and the amount of stores we were in and shelf space we
Yeah,
had was eating up a ton of our budget. And a lot of it was more working capital rather than it being actual working media that's consumer facing. So
right.
collectively, we took a step back, looked at the budget, and decided that our best path forward was to try and bring some of these like main functions in-house. And we'd worked with several agencies, like we've gone through a variety of different agencies, each bringing their own benefit, different type of like cost structures, sometimes working on just project based versus having like agencies on retainer. And really the decision was for something like media, it was too big of a day-to-day responsibility and management that we would be able to bring that in-house. And so we decided, okay, this is where it's worth the money to keep that going on with a separate agency outside that is helping us like set up all these campaigns on like all these different
Yeah,
platforms and do the analytics. It's a very time-consuming job. And then the creative part is what made the most sense for us to bring in-house, the influencer management piece also, because it was so much easier to have direct control and have a team within like your day-to-day office environment that you could just pop over and talk through. This is how I want the expression of the brand to look like, or how the color scheme could come to life, and how we want to build the assets and what we want to communicate. It was cost effective to do it that way. We had a lot more control and the ability to quickly pivot and make changes. And we were in that time and space where there needed to be a lot of like updates and changes where we couldn't work with an agency setup where every revision cost us or we're limited to like a certain number of rounds of revisions. And it was the kind of the differing thing for us. It allowed us to really build a lot of campaigns in-house, test and learn really quickly, and be able to kind of not worry about the cost of every experiment that we're doing. We learned a ton from it, from a creative perspective, from a storytelling perspective, from understanding what type of content resonates with our consumers, what isn't resonating with our consumers. And we got it to a point where we were able to kind of identify, okay, we have a sense of like what's working, what's not working. We want to be able to kind of bring the delicious factor more front and center. We're all about the food. Delicious food sells food.
Yeah.
And we realized that this is where we kind of capped on like the internal capabilities and resources. Like we had an amazing team of like an art director, graphic designers who did like a ton of animation and were able to build our animated ads for us and like bring a lot of the dynamicy into it. But we're limited with like being able to get these like macro delicious shots of the
Yeah.
food, of the bowl, of like a spoon kind of digging in, all of these like things that compel you as a consumer to feel that deliciousness come through. And this is when we started to kind of get into that process, and like the sheer size of the work that we were needing to put out required us to partner with an external agency that could bring that capability. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of the balance of like what works for an in-house versus what works for partnering with an external agency. They were able to kind of help us produce high production value quality content that is commercial worthy, and
Mm.
then we were able to kind of take these assets and like work with our in-house team to like extend the production usability of these assets and like put them to even more use across different touch points, whether it's organic social, pivoting off of this like groundwork of great compelling visual photography and like and videography essentially, and like really being able to kind of take it a step further and extend it across different touch points and extend it across international markets as well. Because that's the other thing where, because we operate not just in the US, we have an international
Yeah.
marketing team that is also very limited. And so we need to be executing assets for them as well. So that was kind of like the great story of like the balancing act that
It's
we
a
got
great
to.
it's a great story, and I think unfortunately, as we all know, for a lot of brands, based on the team structure, they have to become a little bit over reliant on agencies, right? And
Yeah.
it becomes a, a difficult scenario to navigate through because, like you said, you want great end product deliverables and work, but you have to navigate the dynamics of like billable hours and
Hmm.
revision costs, and it creates
Exactly.
this constraint that doesn't necessarily need to be there. So for a lot of marketing leaders that I talk to who have had the bravery and the courage to build that internal team, one of the biggest costs and problems that show up for them is this idea of retention. You know,
Hmm.
when B players become A players and A players start to see, hey, there's a lot of opportunity for me out there. So what's been your personal approach and perhaps your team's approach to, on one hand, uh, mitigating the risk and cost associated with inevitably people leaving? And how do you keep
Yeah.
people there maybe 1 or 2 or 3 years longer than what would be typically average?
Hmm. So I love that because I think that's something that we all kind of like suffer from, but I've been lucky with Sambazon and like the team there, and I hope it's because of the relationship I've been trying to like build and like the drive. I think two things come to mind with this. It's really the progression and career progression and space to grow. I think that's the most important thing, that is the balance of someone who's a leader versus someone who's like very function oriented. As a leader, you have to be able to think like 10 steps ahead of how this person's career progression is going to look like and how you can keep them motivated and feeling like they're growing. I made it a point when I came into this role to spend 30 minutes to an hour talking with each and every member on the team to really home in on like what they want out of this job, what they'd like to do more of, and like where they see themselves growing, and make sure that I'm putting that as part of the plan for
Mm.
how I'm structuring the team and how I'm driving them, uh, building the cases to kind of get certain people promoted that I knew were like bringing value and weren't really being recognized, and making sure that that work gets elevated. So I think that was a big driver of having people stay on the team and not have the attrition, because they have that progression and that learning. That's the most important thing. And in a lot of cases, I think even if the pay isn't that great, like having that progression is big for people who are still at that like early stage of their career and like are valuing that like learning opportunity. So that's one area. The other area is making them feel excited about what they're doing, and then that's contributing to their growth personally. And that's like, it's not just a job or a project that you're doing for the brand or the company only, you're building your resume and your portfolio. So kind of bringing it a bit closer to something they can relate to and care about, and like really explaining the value of how you want to make sure that you're creating change in the area that you're in.
Yeah.
I have someone on the team who, an example of like coming into this job, we wanted to kind of like enhance and reskin like our website and have more of an omni-channel experience and a lot more of interactivity and dynamicy on the website. And my predecessor, like there was this big project that was going to be outsourced to an external agency that was going to cost us like minimum 100,000, and definitely had the potential to get like scope creep and out of the initial kind of like assessment. And I just spent some time talking to the person on our team who was leading, like the software developer who would be working on this. And he expressed interest in like taking the lead on this and like working on that project. And he wanted to just be heard, and wanted the chance to kind of like bring that into fruition. And I ended up making the decision to like scrap that other project, listen to him, work with him. He's telling me that, like, I think a lot of people forget, and you come in and you're acting as a manager and you have that like
Yeah.
thought process, but you need to continually like talk to the people on your team more closer in and know really the nuances and listen to them. And that proved to be like one of the best decisions that I've made in the history of my career. Like he brought so much potential and like added value to like what we ended up doing on our website versus what we would have gotten with an external agency. We were going to be kind of limited on what we can or couldn't do. Everything was going to cost us extra, was going to take a way longer time to kind of like execute. And just because he had that sense of like, I'm building this, I want this to show up, it's my opportunity to shine, he brought like a ton of value and like his A game to
Wow.
it. So I think that's like a lot of what works really for helping people stay motivated and like feel that they're adding value and meaning to the
Yeah.
work. It's not just like going from A to Z and producing something.
Great, great,
That's yeah.
great job. And I just am impressed upon this idea that um, what you're saying reminds me that, at the end of the day, pay is one thing, but I don't even think it's in the
Hmm.
top three reasons why people stay. But having the opportunity to put your thumbprint on something that then goes to the world and has impact,
Hmm.
like having this connection or this linear relationship between what am I working on a random Tuesday afternoon, and how does that trace all the way through to what the consumer touches? I mean, that's fulfillment. And I've
Definitely.
only known you for a short period of time now, but in our first conversation, and then even looking at some of your stuff on LinkedIn, it seems to me that you get a lot of joy, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because I might be wrong, but you get a lot of joy out of the people component of this leadership game, not just,
Yeah.
it almost seems 70% people, 30% function. Is that true?
100%. I think this is something that I actually find pride in. And I'll tell you, it's funny because I grew up and like lived in Egypt up until like 10 years ago when I moved to the US. And it's been a very interesting dynamic, kind of like seeing how we operate as a company, I like multinational companies and like the approach to people as resources versus in the US. It's like way more cutthroat and like it's very transactional in the US, unfortunately. And I think that's been something that I firmly believe in. Like your people are your power, and you're nothing without the people that are on your team. And I think as much as a lot of companies and brands nowadays feel like this is something I can easily replace, and like there's the job market is full of people who are interested in like finding that work. It's you're sending the wrong message, and really putting the value in your people and knowing the these are like the drivers of success for you, I think goes a way longer way than like the short-term perspective. So I think 100% agree. Like for me, it's about the people, the team. You could never do what you can do without them. And my role is to just stay like 10 steps ahead, high level, really think what's coming next and be that person for them where I'm interjecting. And like I've learned that across like the years of when it's important to say no and push back on things to really help your team, and when it's important to listen to them and elevate their work, because then they become your biggest
Yeah.
supporter. Yeah, definitely.
Well, I think I speak on behalf of the industry of these marketing professionals, and when I say, just really appreciate the fact that you shine a spotlight on that and that you're playing the game that way. Not everyone does, but
Yeah.
I think it's just a great reminder.
Thank
Let's do a quick role play here. So let's pretend I'm CMO or CEO, and you have your plan in place, and you're going to be not only functionally what areas of discipline are going to be within the marketing mix, but also who across the board at Sambazon is going to support. But I'm going to ask you the question like, hey, how are you going to measure this thing? Like, what is your belief set of beliefs and playbook on this very broad and very misunderstood topic of measurement? So I want your measurement plan and the way you think about it.
Yeah. No, you're talking about something that is near and dear to my heart, and I've lost a ton of hair against it across the years. But definitely a great story and journey that I've been on, especially at Sambazon. Like again, working with Coke, you had all of these like amazing resources under your fingertips, and you could work with all of these agencies. You had the leeway to like get people to do the work for you and do the analytics for you.
Yeah.
But with a smaller company, it's kind of more challenging. Um, it, I think the learning and the trap that I fell into at the beginning was like being overspread in terms of like all the different ways we can measure what we're doing and what's working. It started out with a lot of the what a lot of people call vanity metrics, like your
Mhm.
impressions, your reach, like which I don't necessarily think are vanity impressions. I think there's a time and space for them and where you look at them and where they come into fruition versus where it kind of comes into play with escalating it up. So for a CMO or for CEOs and like our lead team, getting into the nitty-gritty of all of that and like talking about impressions and CPE, cost per acquisition, like all of that stuff was meaningless and like going honestly, we have a great team that's like ahead of some other lead teams in terms of like digesting that aspect of it. But still, you're talking to someone that comes from a sales background, finance background. It doesn't translate into like the one single question of, are you driving revenue? Are you something beyond the cost center? And I think that's the eternal dilemma
Totally.
that every marketer
So
has.
just want to interrupt you. So you're just
Yeah.
to make a distinction. It's not the case that this stuff would be going over their heads. It's that they understand it
Hmm.
clearly, but it is too many deviations away from the business case.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Ultimately, especially because of our business is not an e-commerce business. I think with e-commerce businesses, it's not an easier route. There's a lot more competition, but it's like a more direct route of being able to say, I ran this ad, I ran this type of messaging, this campaign, this is how much I was able to generate, and you have that direct attribution. With a grocery-based business where all of our CPG business was selling into accounts like Walmart and Target and Whole Foods, and you're looking at like syndicated data and like velocity metrics and
Yeah.
stores selling and like a ton of information that was maddening. Like I think it was I worked with a couple of different consultants trying to get to something that would help us like roll up this measurement and make it make sense. And like first pass at this, it was this behemoth of an Excel that was like pulling all
Yeah.
of this information from like our mass market and our natural channel sales and like all these different minutia of metrics. And again, I was sitting there after like a couple of months of working on this. I'm like, I can't tell a story. It's too many factors that are like out of my hand. Like I can do all of this campaign and work and I can get in front of the consumer and like sell them on the idea of like why they should use our ready to eat acai bowls. But then you lose sight of how that transitions into an actual sale in store because there's so much time in between. You're counting on the fact that the next time they're walking into the grocery store, they see your packaging, they remember it, and they
Yeah.
want to pick it up. And if the merchandising isn't right, or if the pricing at the store isn't right, that you don't have full control over, so many factors. So um, again, we were kind of getting bogged into like all these like sheets of data and not being able to tell a story. So it took really kind of like stepping back for me and like asking the single question of like ultimately what am I trying to relay up to the CMO or CFO or C-suite? What I want to relay is that whatever we're doing on marketing holistically is driving incremental revenue. And especially, I think with sales teams, a lot of the dynamic between marketing and sales is, oh, this is like a sales-led effort. We were able to get the product into that store and like retailer. So we're getting the kind of the
Credit.
attribution of like the
Credit, yeah.
success, the credit for that essentially
Yeah.
versus how
But
much of it is
why are they
marketing.
even letting you come into the store? You got to think about that.
Yes.
There's something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you prove what you're adding? And so we kind of stepped back. I asked myself that question, and ultimately I figured what I want to relay is that what I'm doing is driving increased revenue. And so we decided to kind of use a simple control and test approach. I like did a series of analyses and like worked with our media agency on that as well of like, hey, let's pick a few markets that really make sense to pit against each other. And you're assuming that your baseline performance in the control market is attributable to everything that has to do with like the virtue of just being on shelf, the price promotions that happen. And so anything else that's happening relative, like in addition to that, is
Yeah.
something that we can say is because of the marketing that we're doing,
Ah,
because we have marketing active in these markets, but we don't have marketing active in these other control markets. And essentially it was so you're just looking at the incrementality there. And I felt that was fair because I felt like if you just look at revenue
totally.
directly, that revenue is muddied up with like other initiatives that are helping drive that. But it's the incrementality in the revenue that's really the game changer. And no one can argue with you on that. Like your
Okay,
sales team
so
can
make
say
sure I
this is
understand
us. Yeah.
the control, say makes $1,000. The control plus marketing makes 1,800 bucks. There's
Mm-hmm.
enough buy-in from a leadership that that 800 is attributable enough.
Exactly. And I'm obviously like digesting it to the simplest terms. There are like a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
more technicality into it. But yeah, on
I
a
love
like
it.
a high level note, that's kind of the approach. And there was buy-in because again, you're assuming that 1,000 is driven by natural presence, other sales driven factors, and the 800 expert, like you mentioned, is really what you're doing with marketing efforts in the market where you have active media happening.
Yeah.
And yeah, we ended up like looking at how much media we're spending in that market. Let's say it's Los Angeles versus Atlanta. How much marketing media spend is going in there? And you just do a simple kind of return on ad spend
Yeah.
of that like incremental revenue relative to that like ad spend. And that's like what I like to call like incremental media efficiency ratio. It's essentially
I
like, are
love it.
you being efficient with that spend? And ultimately that's the question. That's what they want to see. Like
Yeah.
they don't care about like what necessarily platforms are working, what aren't, what isn't working, what creative is working. Those are all things that we digest internally at as a team.
Right.
But elevating it up to that single thing made the like lead team and C-suite look at us as beyond more than just a cost center. We're
Yeah.
actually participating and driving the revenue. So that was a huge game changer for
I
us.
love it. Has the lead team ever asked the same analysis to be done on something not media? So something more like brand, which is now we're getting into a whole different ball of
Mm-hmm.
wax. And short of just not building any brand content, you would never know. Or is
Yeah.
this analysis really focused on media?
No, so this part of the analysis is focused on the media and it's like the impact of because a lot of our marketing efforts are based on media. For me,
Okay.
it kind of sums that up. And it
Yeah.
was we were just kind of operating on like Instagram, YouTube, and like that was the extent of where we were spending our money. So that was the bulk of like the marketing efforts. But I think to your point, brand awareness and is that being moved was another part of the story that we needed to tell. And something that I also like learned a lot with, we again a few years back we approached Kantar and decided to do like a brand lift study almost with them. Obviously, very reputable company, but doing several like quarterly
Yeah.
waves on this, quickly kind of learned that we were so small that like the groups that we were tapping into to kind of get a read on how we're moving the needle in the markets we're in was immeasurable. Again, this was a few years back, single digit brand awareness in markets, and you're really kind of not seeing any traction. And so the other big learning and shift that we had on this and that like was a major game changer for us was changing where we're doing the brand lift studies. So we were looking at brand awareness, ad recall, and purchase interest. And we decided to do those on the platforms that we're actually running the media on. It makes a ton of sense. And it
Yeah,
was like
totally.
a lightning moment of like, why weren't we doing that? Why were we going the big route? And this is something that works for the likes of Coca-Cola, but or like bigger brands, but doesn't work for a smaller brand. And so that was another shift that we did with our media agency, where we started running like different waves twice a year of these like brand lift studies, and we started seeing the momentum. It was great. Like we had a reading, ran the campaign, got to see kind of like, okay, we're moving the needle on awareness, we're moving the needle on ad recall, and it enabled us to actually test and learn directly that way as well. So we would dissect like our creative ad assets, look at the storytelling, look at where we were losing people, dropping off of like the ad and
Yeah.
view time on like, are we getting the main thing through in the first 3 seconds or 7 seconds of a 15-second ad? And we started making adjustments in our ad assets and like our storytelling there. And then again, the next wave you run this, the next wave of the brand love study, you see that. And again, this was perfect for us to kind of take back as like one single dashboard that we're pairing with the like media efficiency
Yeah.
ratio measurement and say, okay, from a revenue perspective and like is the spend that we're putting from media driving revenue? Yes, you have the picture, but to also augment that picture as well, are we driving the other big question of are we driving traction
Love it.
with brand awareness? And we saw a 2x lift in like our brand awareness going from single digit to double digit in like a year and a half just by
Good for
making
you.
these small changes.
I love it. I love it because I think the takeaway for me here is that there was a desire to not be considered a cost center. It all
Mm-hmm.
started from here, I think, is what I'm hearing. It
Yep.
started from this desire to be like, we're not going to fight with you to get a seat at the table. We are the table, and
Yeah.
and we're going to be an area of investment, which then triggered uh, some work to be put into creating this efficiency ratio, which ultimately
Mm-hmm.
drives your decision making from an optimization standpoint, and ultimately gives your team an opportunity to show impact, which keeps retention and it's full circle. But it's
Exactly.
all it's all pinpointed to this desire of not being a cost center. So
Exactly.
I love it.
Exactly.
So uh, shifting gears here, like for marketing leaders, I think there's a lot of pressure from colleagues,
Mm-hmm.
from the market, from society, from their non-marketing leadership in some cases, to do as many things as you can. What's your belief system around this avoidance of random acts of marketing, or this
I
belief
love
in
that.
that, you can get twice as much impact out of half the amount of things? Do you believe this,
Yeah.
and what's been your approach to this?
Yeah, definitely. 100% believe this. Again, a big learning journey for me personally on that. I want to say like 4 or 5 years back, we were falling in the trap, and that was a failure, I think, on our ends, where we were doing two things wrong. We were very like we had multiple different campaigns. So we would have like a campaign that was for like the new year and it's new you and it's promoting going back to health and wellness. And then we'd have another campaign that was more of a cause-driven campaign. And we completely lost sight of the fact that we were acting like this big brand that was super well known and needed to have all these varied campaigns, and forgetting the key thing that was missing is that no one really knows what we're about. Like it's very disjointed. And I credit this to like my partner who was like leading integrated marketing at that time to help us kind of like hone in on that. I was in brand management, he was in integrated marketing, and it was like us kind of working together to get to that realization. And so that was part of like the whole approach of rethinking conciseness, simplicity, and messaging from a brand storytelling perspective. The other aspect was the shiny object syndrome of like, oh, someone's doing affiliate marketing and it seems to be working for them. Someone's doing Spotify podcast ads and they're booming. And you forget
Mm.
because you don't have that like insight talking to these teams is that they're probably doing just that one platform at scale. It's not that you're seeing this like brand showing up on Spotify. It means that they're doing all these other platforms. So we ended up like trying Spotify ads, podcasts, Pinterest, TikTok, Instagram. We were spread all over the place. It was
Yeah.
chaotic to manage, taking a very small media budget and like really spreading it way too thin. And the other thing was like the spreading the number of markets you're actively spending media. And
Right.
again, we had a previous agency where the advice was, okay, we can use this budget across like these six types of channels and in like 11 markets and it's gonna work. But ultimately, it wasn't working. Like you're showing up with like a splatter and a splash here and there. You're not really making any noise and resonance. And again, I think it's like this shift of less is more, and what works for bigger brands that are established is definitely not going to work for a smaller brand.
Yeah.
And that was a big kind of learning curve. So we
Mm.
ended up taking a more analytical approach with how we're looking at the markets that we need to be actively in. Instead of like going across 11 markets, we came up with this like weighted index looking at like different factors that really tell a compelling story of like, is this market worth our while and worth our media? So five different indices, one of them being how well of a distribution set you have. Like if it was anything less than 50% ACV
Yeah.
in like these markets, it didn't make sense. Like you're going to spend all of this media, people are going to walk into the store and it's like 30% of the stores in the market have your product. The conversion isn't going to happen. We looked at like the makeup of our target audience, the cost of like spending a variety of different indices that helped us really say, okay, LA, Miami, like these markets make the most sense for us to really have our media spend go further and resonate further with that audience. So I think a combination of that, the whole like theme of less is more, whether it's with messaging, with the amount of platforms and channels we're on, we went from these six different channels to just Instagram and YouTube, not
Yeah.
even Facebook. Like we come back on Facebook and we're like, okay, we're a visual brand. We tell our story with, it's not about the function, it's about the delicious like food and
Right.
the delicious looking acai bowls. So we need to be on a very visual platform. And it's less about like people talking about all the perks and benefits. And we went from having like six different channels to just being on to having 11 markets that we're running media in to just doing six markets that
Mm.
technically drive the bulk of our revenue. And it made all the difference in like how we were
I love it.
seeing the results. Yeah.
So for marketing leaders that are struggling, I think most marketing leaders kind of acknowledge and understand when they're committing the random acts of marketing fraud or the
Yeah.
shiny objects, but they don't have the kind of clear path in terms of how to avoid that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm hearing from you is that potentially a hack, or not a hack, but really just a best practice is to allow or create a North Star through the matrix,
Mm-hmm.
the five components, as well as even the incremental revenue business case, and allow that stuff to serve as the reasons for why you would say no to certain things. Is that right?
Exactly. A
Okay.
100%. And I think tying it together to your point, like when we started looking at that like media efficiency ratio, it was giving us like a quick sense of like, is what we're doing working or not? So if you're seeing like a certain market, you're spending all this money on all these different platforms and it's not driving any traction, okay, let's like cut back on the number of platforms that we're doing and like go bigger and deeper on like showing up on Instagram or showing up on YouTube, and then we look at like the revenue and like that quotient media efficiency and you start seeing traction. So it helps you kind of like quickly assess and tell like month to month if some of these like critical decisions that you're doing are working. And I think that the advice I have for smaller up and coming brands is to actually approach it the other way around. I think a lot of people want to like test and learn, and there's this whole culture of like quick test and learns and like running on all
Totally.
these different platforms. And it gets so overwhelming that you lose sight of like really what is working, what's not
What
working,
are
and
we
the
testing?
platforms are constantly changing and the metrics are constantly changing. And I think it's the reverse. It's like focus on like one platform, run with success on that one, like show up big on that one, and then take it kind of the next step and like scale it to the other second platform that you've instead of the other way around. I think that's been my experience at least.
That's a great takeaway and great value. So thank you for that. We're gonna go rapid fire for the next couple. Okay. So just
Yeah.
your um what would you be willing to admit is your superpower as a marketing leader?
EQ.
Okay.
Yeah,
Knowing
emotional. I
people.
think knowing people, listening to people, really listening. Like I love this thing with I think it was the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. Like you have two ears and one mouth. I constantly remind myself of that. Like you're here to listen more, and like the less you say, the more meaningful what you say is, and like really reading the person in front of you, reading body language, and like putting it all together, and like being emotionally intelligent. I think goes a long way. Yeah.
What's your Achilles heel as a marketing leader?
Achilles heel. I think it's the pull of that like shiny object syndrome that you have to kind of like really continue to tell yourself, no, 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 walk away from this. This isn't the right thing. Like you see all these brands showing up on like different platforms and succeeding. Like, is this gonna work for us if we did that? So I think it's this like diversion of attention that happens and that you have to kind of like continue to remind yourself as a leader to cut the noise out and like cut any kind of imposter syndrome out and like focus on the work and the work will tell the story for you and succeed for you.
Yeah. What's the number one marketing challenge that Sambazon faces today?
Remains to be like the brand awareness is typically like while we've made great tractions and strides, I think it's the small media budget and like the small marketing budget that we have and like being very strategic with where we're putting that spend continues to definitely be a challenge for us. Yeah.
What's one top lesson all time or recently that you've learned from another marketing leader or a leader within your
Mm,
organization that comes to mind because it kind of struck a chord. It stuck.
record. I think it would be authenticity. Like a lot of brands and I think like working with influencers and it's become very difficult to really show up with your authentic self as a brand and in a space that is like very much like quick kind of explosive working with this like special person or ambassador and like it's a very we like Patagonia does this super well, like as a brand, like staying authentic and true to the nature of like what they're there for and what they're trying to do, and having that be kind of like the beacon. And you see it like with the consumers, like a lot of consumers that buy this brand and stick to it, like really have the the appreciation for how authentic they are. And I think in this like industry we're in and like this age that we're in right now, it's very shiny object, like who's popping up in that space and like working with big names or like making a splash that you really lose sight of it. And that's kind of a reminder that I feel is a struggle to always maintain. Like you want to show up and be
Yeah.
resonating with what works with the younger generation, is appealing to them, but it's like how do you balance that with an authentic story that really makes sense and stays
That's
true to who you are.
it's an ongoing battle.
Hmm.
Last question is there something that you're curious to ask my next guest? Something that, they're going to be someone similar. They're playing the game of marketing leadership in their own unique way, but they're, burdened by shiny objects. They're burdened by trying to figure out measurement, all of these things. So what are you curious
Hmm.
to ask them?
Oh, a lot of great options here. I think it would be like, what is the next big thing that you think is like changing in the industry from a marketing perspective that you feel is like a big shift in how things have been done and is worthy of people kind of like really rethinking how we're approaching. That would be my question.
And I'll add one thing onto that for them, and you're not allowed to answer AI or anything related to AI.
Yes, yeah. I think we're
Okay.
all like done with
Yeah.
it.
Final question, is it acai or acai?
It's acai. So yeah, we
Okay.
like to kind of, it's always a dilemma and something we're always working on, but yeah, acai. Yeah.
Everyone, my guest, Shereen Elsammaa, that was fantastic. Thank you for sharing and giving and understanding that this is a team sport. Marketing leaders need to bond together, and I just think the way you're playing it, focus on team, focus on North Star from a business case standpoint, the right way to test and learn and optimize, not just test and learn with no control or test with a
Mhm.
dilution approach across. I love the way you're playing the game, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Caleb. Thank you so much for having me as a guest on your podcast. And like, it's been great chatting with you.
Awesome. Thank you.